Hello friends, welcome to my channel Explore with Joyeeta. The 2023 G20 New Delhi Summit was the 18th meeting of G20. It was held in Bharat Mandapam International Exhibition Convention Center, Pragati Maidan, New Delhi on 9 and 10 September 2023. It was the first G20 summit held in India. The Group of 20 is the premier forum for international economic cooperation. It plays an important role in shaping and strengthening global architecture and governance on all major international economic issues. G20 is a collection of 20 of the world's largest economies formed in 1999. Was conceived as a bloc that would bring together the most important industrialized and developing economies to discuss international economic and financial stability. Its annual summit, a gathering of G20 leaders that debuted in 2008, has evolved into a major forum for discussing economics as well as other pressing global issues. Bilateral meetings on the summit sidelines have occasionally led to major international agreements. But before understanding G20, we have to understand G7 first, because G7 was formed before G20. In the uncertain years following the 1971 collapse of the Bretton Woods system of fixed international exchange rates tied to the price of gold and the 1973 oil crisis, the need for better coordination of economic and financial policy at the highest level became evident. The Bretton Woods system was an international monetary agreement that standardized currency exchange rates. Currencies belonging to various nations were pegged against the US dollar. The US dollar itself was pegged against the price of gold. It aimed to bring uniformity to global exchange rates. It was based on the gold standard. This system regulated international trade between 44 countries and remained in practice from 1945 to 1973. The system collapsed because the US dollar could not hold its value. The collapse of Bretton Woods encompasses the events involved in the sequential withdrawal of convertibility of gold into dollars, thereby ending the role of gold as a liquid dollar claim, and the end of the unified fixed exchange rate regime from 1968 through 1973. On the other hand, Arab countries imposed an oil embargo. They stopped selling oil to those countries that were supporting Israel, mostly Western countries like America and Europe. These Western countries relied heavily on oil coming from the Middle East, and because of this, their countries witnessed a heavy economic recession. Their government decided that if they wanted to improve the economic situation, they needed to take action together. Finance ministers from key countries led the way. On March 25, 1973, the finance ministers of Britain, France, Germany, and the United States met and formed the Library Group, named after the venue of the initial meeting, the White House Library. In September of that year, they were joined by the Japanese finance minister, and this group, subsequently known as the Group of Five, G5, met periodically for more than a decade. Following these exploratory meetings, the French president in 1974 invited the heads of the government from the United States, Britain, West Germany, Japan, and Italy to a summit the next year at Rambouillet, France. In 1976, the group was expanded to 7 with the addition of Canada and has met 36 times in total. Beginning in the early 1990s, Russia began participating in some of the sessions with G7 leaders during their summits, and at the invitation of the G7, Russia formally joined the group in 1997. The G7 thus became the G8. By the late 1990s, however, a series of financial crises centered largely in Latin America and Asia had convinced the G7 finance ministers that key emerging economies were insufficiently included in global economic management efforts. Finance ministers had been meeting together with their central bank governor counterparts in parallel to the G7 summit since 1986. Their mandate had been focused on fairly technical matters related to economic and financial growth and stability. Inflation and currency developments led by Canadian Finance Minister Paul Martin and US Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers. Discussions were expanded to include a range of new players. After 4 initial meetings in 1998 and 1999 involving larger groups of countries, on 26 September 1999, the G20 was established. Now, the question was that which country should be kept in the G20? The very first criterion was that the G7 members would definitely remain. Then they saw the countries which were handling the biggest economies. On this basis, China, India, Brazil, South Africa and Russia were included. Then they looked for the biggest regional powers because it was necessary to have a representation of every region in the world. For this reason, Indonesia and South Korea from Asia, Brazil and Argentina from South America, Mexico from North America, Australia from Oceania, Saudi Arabia and Turkey from Middle East, and Europe, apart from G7 countries, European Union was considered as a whole to represent the rest of Europe. Today, there are 19 countries in G20 and 1 European Union. These 20 countries are among the top 20 countries in the world, not only politically and economically, but also military and population-wise. The main purpose of G20 was to deal with the financial crisis. The G20 group meetings were attended by only the financial ministers and the central bank governors of these countries. This continued for many years until the global financial crisis of 2008. Then these countries realized that not only the financial ministers but also the presidents and prime ministers need to meet. The cooperation between all the countries should be at the next level if future financial crises were to be prevented. That is why the first official summit of G20 leaders was held in 2008. This first summit was held in America, where these countries collectively decided to reduce trade barriers between them, increase the spending. In total, they aimed to spend $4 trillion so that all the economies could be revived. Since 2008, the G20 summit has been held every year, and it happens in a different country every year. To set the agenda of these G20 meetings and to ensure that it is working smoothly, a Troika system is used. Under the Troika system, 3 countries work together: current G20 president, G20 president of the previous year, and G20 president of the upcoming year. Last year, the G20 summit was held in Indonesia. This year, it was held in India, and in 2024, it will be held in Brazil. So, Indonesia, India, and Brazil are the current Troika countries. The G20 presidency works on rotational. Among the 20 members of G20, every year a member becomes the president. Apart from these 20 countries, guest countries are also invited to G20 summits. Spain is a permanent invitation to these summits. Host countries can also invite other countries. India invited 9 more countries: Mauritius, Netherlands, Nigeria, Singapore, Spain, UAE, Bangladesh, Egypt, and Oman. The permanent guest list also includes some other major institutions like the African Union, United Nations, WHO, WTO, IMF, and the chair countries of ASEAN. Every G20 leader appoints a personal representative of the government leader, known in the trade as Sherpa. Sherpas tend to be appointed for more than 1 year and provide both institutional memory and means to ensure follow-up on previous commitments. Together, the nations of the G20 account for around 80% of global economic output, nearly 75% of global exports, and about 60% of the world's population. India has set the theme of Vasudev Kutumbakam and has placed importance on themes like green development and sustainable development goals. Along with it, digital public